Hello students, myself Dr. Mitsi Patel, Associate Professor in Mechanical Engineering Department, Silver Oak University. Today we discuss about the steam boiler from Basic Mechanical Engineering subject. So first we talk about the boiler. What is boiler? So a steam boiler is usually a closed vessel made of steel. So what is the function? This function is to transfer the heat produced by the combustion of a fuel to water and ultimately to generate the steam. So what is the function of the boiler? It's convert water into the steam. So first we add the water into the boiler, then we supply the heat energy by the any kind of fuel. It may be a solid, it may be a gaseous, it may be a liquid form. Then the heat is transferred to that water, and then the water is get converted into the steam parts. So ultimately it generates the steam according to the IBR. What is IBR? IBR is the Indian Boiler Regulation. What is IBR? IBR, it means Indian Boiler Regulation. A boiler is a closed vessel with capacity exceeding 22.75 liter used for generating steam under pressure. Again, I repeat the technical definition about according to the IBR, Indian Boiler Regulation. A boiler is a closed pressure vessel with capacity exceeding 22.75 liter used for generating steam under pressure. Now we classify the certain types of boiler. So based on here you can see we have a total 7 types of classification of boiler. First we have a first classification according to the geometric orientation. So according to the geometric orientation we have a 3 types of boiler. First one is the horizontal boiler, second one is the vertical boiler, and third one is the inclined boiler. Now we move further for the second type. As per the position of water and flue gases, here we have a mainly two things. First one is the water, which we have supplied the heat to the water and it will get converted into the steam. And second one is the flue gases. Flue gases, that means the heat energy. So according to the position of water and gases, there are 2 types, fire tube boiler and water tube boiler. Now we move for the third type, position of furnace. Furnace, that means where at which place we have burned our fuel, which burn our fuel. That means at the location at which we ignite the fuel and our fuel is burned and create the and produce the heat energy. That heat energy is get transferred to the water, and water is heated, the temperature go rise, and after the saturation temperature is get converted into the steam. So according to the position of furnace, there are mainly 2 types, externally fired boiler and internally fired boiler. What is the difference between externally and internally? Then for location of the furnace is inside the boiler, that is called the internally fired boiler, and outside the boiler, that is called the externally fired boiler. Externally fired boiler, that means I ignite a fuel or I burn a fuel at certain place, then I transfer that heat energy or hot flue gases to the boiler. That is called externally fired boiler. And what is internally fired boiler? I have burned the fuel inside the boiler set, that is called the internally fired boiler. Now we move further the fourth type, according to the nature of water circulation. Water circulation is the most important term in the boiler because we convert the steam from the water. So according to the nature of the water circulation, we have a 2 types. First one is the natural circulation boiler and second one is the forced circulation boiler. In forced circulation boiler, we are using the pump. In natural circulation boiler is using the gravitational force. It gets transferred from one place to another place. And now fifth one, according to the working pressure, we have a 3 types, high pressure boiler, low pressure boiler and medium pressure boiler. There is a range between 3.5 bar to 10 bar, 10 bar to 25 bar, and beyond 25 bar, that is called the higher pressure. 3.5 to 10 is called low pressure, 10 to 25 bar is called medium pressure, and above 25 bar is called high pressure. Now sixth one, according to the mobility of boiler, our boiler is portable or our stationary. According to the mobility, there are two types. First one is the stationary boiler, second one is the portable boiler, and last one, seventh one, according to the number of tubes. According to the number of tubes, we have a two boiler. One is a single tube boiler and second one is a multi-tube boiler. Now we go further in detail. According to the geometric orientation, first type, we have a total seven types. Out of seven, first one is the according to the geometric orientation of a boiler. First one is the horizontal boiler, or we can take an example is a Lancashire boiler and locomotive boiler. Both boiler are horizontal boiler. Second one is the vertical boiler. Cochrane boiler is a vertical boiler. And third one is the inclined boiler. So we can consider the Babcock-Wilcox boiler is a inclined boiler. Now we talk about according to the position of water and hot flue gases. So already we discussed about the second type in the previous slide. According to the position of water and hot flue gases, there are two types. First one is a fire tube boiler, second one is a water tube boiler. So here you can see that first we talk about the fire tube boiler. So here I burned the hot coal. Then after burning of the coal, hot flue gases are generated and goes into the tube, and after the heat is transferred to the water and the hot flue gases goes out the chimney. So what happened here, the hot flue gases are in the tube and outside the tube are water, and the heat is transferred from hot flue gases to the water. So in tube is a hot flue gases, that's why its boiler is called as a fire tube boiler. And we are take the example of the fire tube boiler is Cochrane boiler, Lancashire boiler and locomotive boiler. Now next one is called the water tube boiler. So according to the location of water and hot flue gases, second type is a water tube boiler. So according to the water tube boiler, here you can see here I burned the, here is the furnace. In furnace I burned the hot fuel. Fuel may be a liquid form, gas form, or we can consider as a solid form. After burning, the hot flue gases are generated, and hot flue gases are generated that goes outside the tube, and inside the tube here you can see the water inserted, and here is the steam outlet. That means the water inside the tube and the hot flue gas is outside. Then what is the meaning of this tube in water? That means the water in tube, that is called the water tube boiler. This boiler is called as a water tube boiler, or we can consider the water tube boiler is a Babcock-Wilcox boiler. Babcock-Wilcox boiler is called as a water tube boiler. I am not going inside the every boiler, but just I am go through the orientation of the, or we can consider the classification of the boiler. There are total seven types of boiler. I already covered first one and second one. Now we move further to according to the position of furnace. According to the position of furnace, we have a two types: externally fired boiler, internally fired boiler. I already talked about the what is the externally fired boiler means and what is the internally fired boiler means. Externally fired boiler, that means the fuel is burnt external from the boiler. That means the fuel is not burned inside the boiler. So what we have do, we have done the burning of fuel is outside the boiler, and then we supply that heat energy, hot flue gases inside the boiler. That is called the externally fired boiler. And what is internally fired boiler? The furnace itself is inside the boiler. What is the function of furnace? In furnace we have burned the fuel, solid, liquid or gas, and then fuel is burnt. After the fuel is burnt, the heat energy is generated, and that heat energy, or we can consider as a hot flue gases, is transferred to the water, and that heat energy transferred to the water, and water gets converted into the steam. So here we take the certain example of externally fired boiler is Babcock-Wilcox boiler is a externally fired boiler. Cochrane boiler and Lancashire boiler are internally fired boiler. Now next one is the according to the nature of water circulation. Based on nature, we have a two types. First one is the natural circulation boiler. Second one is the forced circulation boiler. In natural circulation boiler, the gravitational force play a vital role, and in forced circulation boiler, we are using the pump. So natural circulation boiler, the examples are Lancashire boiler, Babcock-Wilcox boiler, both are natural circulation boiler. And second one is the forced circulation boiler. Bunsen boiler, Velox boiler and Lamont boiler. First one natural circulation boiler and forced circulation boiler, second one. Now according to the working pressure, there are based on the working pressure, there are three types. We already discussed the range 3.5 to 10 bar is called the low pressure boiler, 10 bar to 25 bar is called the medium pressure boiler, and 25 beyond the 25 bar is called the high pressure boiler. So here you can see the high pressure boiler range is the beyond the 25 bar, that is the Babcock-Wilcox boiler is called high pressure boiler. Lancashire and locomotive boiler is called medium pressure boiler, and the lower pressure boiler are Cornish boiler and Cochran boiler. These are two are the low pressure boiler. Now according to the mobility of boiler, that means there are two types. The boiler is stationary or portable. So based on the stationary boiler, Lancashire boiler, Babcock-Wilcox boiler, and portable boiler is locomotive boiler. So you can understand easily, if we have a power plant which is generate the electricity and is transferred to the grid. So whatever boiler are using in the power plants for the electricity generation, that is called as a stationary boiler. We cannot transfer that boiler to another place. And what is the portable boiler? Portable boiler, that means that we can easily transfer from one place to another place of that boiler. That means in Titanic we have used the boiler and it goes from one place to another place, that is called the portable boiler. If we are using any kind of power plant, we can take the Tata Power, we can take the Adani Power, or we can take example of the Torrent Power. So all these power plant have the boiler, and that boiler is not transferred from one place to another place which we require. So it is called the stationary boiler, and if we transfer from one place to another place, it's called the portable boiler. Now according to the number of tube, if we are using the single tube, the start and end, that is the only one start and one end, that is called the single tube. And second one is the multi-tube. In multi-tube we have a multiple start point and multiple end point. We can say that multiple inlet and multiple outlet. So the Cornish boiler has a single tube boiler, and multi-tube boiler is Cochran boiler, or we can say that Lancashire boiler, or we can say Babcock-Wilcox boiler. All three boilers are the multi-tube boilers. So according to the number of tubes, two boilers, single tube boiler, multi-tube boiler. Single tube boiler is a Cornish boiler, multi-tube boiler is a Cochran boiler, Lancashire boiler, and Babcock-Wilcox boiler. After discussing the classification of boiler part, now we move further next topic, the comparison between fire tube boiler and water tube boiler. This comparison is very most important comparison, a very most important part of the steam boiler chapter. So there are 14 certain criteria on which we have compare the fire tube boiler and water tube boiler. The first one criteria is flow of hot flue gases and water. So for the fire tube boiler, gases are inside the tube, that's why the boiler is called the fire tube boiler, and water is outside the tube. And for the water tube boiler, water inside the tube and gases outside the tube, that's why that boiler is called the water tube boiler. Second one is the location of furnace. So location of furnace, if the location is internal, then it is called internally fired boiler. If external, then it is called externally fired boiler. So for the fire tube boiler, the location of furnace is internal, and for the water tube boiler, the location of the furnace is external. Third criteria is the floor space area requirement. For the fire tube boiler, we have required the larger space area, and for the water tube boiler, we require the smaller space area compared to the fire tube boiler. Fourth one is the capacity. So we have a higher capacity compared to fire tube boiler is in water tube boiler. So we have a water tube boiler, we can consider the 50,000 kg per hour steam generation, and for the fire tube boiler is 10,000 kg per hour steam generation. So if we generate the more steam in water tube boiler, so the fifth criteria is evaporation. So evaporation rate is fast for the water tube boiler, so that we can generate the higher rate of steam compared to fire tube boiler. And for the evaporation rate of fire tube boiler is slow. Sixth criteria is the pressure range. Pressure range, that is the very important. If we have a higher evaporation rate, if we have a higher steam generation rate, then our pressure will be more. So in water tube boiler we have a 170 to 200 bar pressure, and in fire tube boiler we have a 50 to 20 bar pressure range. Now we talk about the seventh criteria, that is called the efficiency criteria. In efficiency, the efficiency of fire tube boiler is 80% and the efficiency of water tube boiler is 92%. So now we talk about the safety part. In safety part, we have a larger water content and low steam generation, so that we don't require that much safety in fire tube boiler. But when we talk about the water tube boiler, there is a small water content and a large steam content, so that we need a more safety compared to fire tube boiler. And the ninth criteria is the explosion. In explosion, what does it mean? Explosion in boiler will get fired, totally fired. So what does it mean? The in fire to boiler, lesser risk due to the lower pressure, and it will be higher risk into the water tube boiler because the steam generation part is high, the evaporation rate is high, as well as the pressure range is high, so that there is a chance of explosion more in water tube boiler. Now 10th criteria, the application. So the fire tube boiler is not suitable for the large power plant, and water tube boiler suitable for the large power plant. Large power, that means the whatever boiler or whatever power plant used for the generation of the electricity, that is called the large power plant. And whatever power plant is utilized for our own purpose, that is called the small power plant, or we can call as a medium power plant. If we have a bakery and we are using a boiler in bakery, that means that is called the lower power plant, power plant, or we can consider as a medium range power plant. And if we are using the totally for the electricity generation, and with that transfer that electricity to the government, or we can sell to that electricity to the customer or consumer, that is called the large power plant. 11th point, the criteria skill required. If we have a large power plant, if we have a large pressure, if we have a large steam generation in water tube boiler, so more skill required, and for the fire tube boiler less skill required. Now point number 12, in point number 12, the water treatment. That is no necessary in the fire tube boiler, but it is must necessary for the water tube boiler. Now 13th point is the construction. Construction is very difficult because inside the tube is the fire, and water tube boiler construction is very simple. It requires less space. Now we talk about the transportation. Transportation of fire tube boiler is difficult compared to water tube boiler, and the water tube boiler is very simple, so that we can easily transfer. Transportation is easy. Now we talk about the certain factor when we go for the selection of the boiler for our power plant. First we require the pressure and the quality of steam. So first our point is requirement of working pressure and the quality of steam. Second one is the rate of steam generation. At which rate we have required the steam, how much amount of steam we have required at per hour, that is the second criteria. Third one is the available floor area, how much amount of land we have, that is the third criteria. Fourth criteria, initial cost budget, that is the fourth criteria for the selection of the boiler. Fifth criteria, accessibility for inspection and maintenance. Accessibility for the inspection and maintenance, that means we can easily inspect the boiler and we can easily maintain the boiler. Or if we normal maintenance were required, we can easily maintenance done by the employee. That is called the accessibility for inspection and maintenance, and easy availability of the maintenance parts. And sixth one is the availability of fuel and water. That is the more important part. Without water or without burning the fuel, we cannot get the steam. So both are the very most important. We can easily get the water and we can easily get the fuel. Then and then the boiler, or we can consider the power plant, get work. Now the certain points are there, which are the we called as a good boiler. There are certain essential requirement. Based on that requirement, we can call as a good boiler. Boiler is good. So first one is the it should produce maximum steam at minimum expense of fuel. If we supply minimum fuel and we get the maximum output, maximum steam, then and then we can call as that boiler is good. Second one is required the occupy the minimum space. Third one is that it should be a light in weight, so we can transport, or we can transportation will be easy. Fourth one, its tube should be sufficiently strong to resist the wear and corrosion. The material of tube which we use inside the boiler, that tube is sufficiently strong to resist the wear and corrosion. Now here you can see the here I will show you the simple vertical boiler, and outside the boiler cell certain small amount of small picture you can see which are added here. You can see here the small parts. There are a certain small part we are sticking the outside the boiler cell. So what it is, there are the certain mountings and certain accessories. So what are the mounting, what are the accessories, we can go into the next lecture. Here we discuss the simple parts of the simple vertical boiler and how the vertical boiler gets operated. So here you can see that I will give you the 1 minute. You can just go through the name of the parts. Then I will explain the each part and the function of the each part. Here you can see the feed check valve, fire hole, hand hole, fusible plug, water gauges. Then you can go for the manhole, pressure gauge, steam stop valve, chimney, up stack, down stack, safety valve, steam space, cylindrical cell, firebox, crossbox, firebox, again grate and S-pit. So these are the certain different kinds of mounting and accessories and certain parts of the boiler. So what is the function of each one? If we talk about what is the function of pressure gauge, what is the function of steam stop valve, what is the function of water gauges, what is the function of fusible gauge or fusible plug. So there are a certain mounting and certain accessories, but which we discuss about in detail in next subsequent lectures. But here we discuss about the certain parts and function of the vertical boiler. Now first one is the cylindrical cell. What is the cylindrical cell? It is the exterior case of the boiler which contain the water and steam. That is called the cylindrical cell. Second one is the grate. Grate, that means the where we put the fuel for the burn inside the furnace. So it supports the solid fuel in the boiler furnace, and grate is so designed that it can also allow the air from the downward side to admit air for the fuel combustion or for the fuel burning, because we require oxygen for the fuel burning. Fire hole. Fire hole, that means that it is a hole through which we put the fuel on the grate. That is called the fire hole. Now next one is the firebox. What is the firebox? So the firebox is the area where fuel is burnt and produce the heat to boil the water inside the boiler. That is called the firebox, or we can call as a firebox is that is a furnace. It is a synonyms of the furnace. S-pit. S-pit, that means it collects the ash and clinker that falls from the furnace. If I put the fuel on the grate and I burn that fuel, after that fuel is burned, the hot flue gases are generated and then they transfer to the water. Okay, and whatever excess part or whatever ash is generated after burning of the fuel, that get collect from the bottom part, and in bottom part we have a S-pit. Sixth one is called the smoke box. Smoke box, that means the exhaust gases are the combined here and then pass through the chimney to the atmosphere. That is called the smoke box. It is a nothing but it is a collection box of the exhaust gases, and then the gases are transferred to the chimney to the atmosphere. Now the manhole. Manhole is required for the maintenance purposes or inspection purpose. So it is generally an oval shaped access door through which worker can enter inside the boiler for the purpose of inspection, cleaning, or we can call it as a maintenance. Handhole. Handhole have the same function of the manhole, but the person is stand outside the boiler and using that door just put up his hand inside the boiler and do the work of cleaning, inspection and maintenance. That is called the hand hole. So it is a small hole for the access, useful for the inspection, cleaning and some of the internal part of the boiler, that using the hand hole. Mud box is a very important part for the boiler, any kind of boiler. So it is a drum mounted at the bottom of the cell. In mud box we have collected the impurities of the boiler. If whatever impurities occur in the water, or we can consider the impurities available inside the fuel, that is they collected at the mud. Now 10th one, fire tube and flue. In a boiler, when a primary heating surface is tubes with the hot flue gases, so that such tubes are called as a fire tubes. And last one, 11th one, that is a steam collecting pipe. In steam collecting pipe, steam is leaving the boiler and always the contains the water particles. So what the steam collecting pipe do? That water particles which present inside the steam, that is separated from the steam, and only steam will get outside the boiler. So steam leaving the boiler always contain water particles, and steam collecting pipe is used to remove the water particles contained in the steam, and it is located inside the boiler cell just before the steam outlet. Okay, so today we discuss certain basics of introduction of boiler, then the classification of boiler. After the classification, we discuss all the seven classification in detail. Then we discuss about the 14, based on 14 criteria, the comparison between fire tube boiler and water tube boiler. After that comparison, we discuss about the selection criteria for the boiler. Then what is the good boiler, what is the requirement for we can say the boiler is good. So we learned the certain criteria for that also. After that we discussed about the simple diagram of the vertical boiler, or we can say that the simple vertical boiler, and different parts which are stick to outside the boiler cell, that is called the different parts of the simple vertical boiler. And we discuss 11 parts are in detail, what is the name of that part and what is the function of that part inside the simple vertical boiler. So after concluding this lecture, we go for the next lecture. In next lecture we continue this chapter to the further, and we discuss about the certain mountings and accessories. We have a certain mounting and accessories. What is the difference between mounting and accessories? We discuss in the next lecture. So today we conclude our lecture here. Thank you, students. If you have any kind of doubt, you can contact me anytime. Thank you.